Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 276 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Mary. Mary is Zach's mom, and I have had the privilege of knowing her for most of this year now. So I know you are just going to love hearing about her, and we'll talk about how we know each other so well in a bit. But I also wanted to take a second to talk again about dates. So as you've noticed, for many episodes now, the date of either the recording or when the release is going to be has been really special. And I feel like that has just been kind of divine intervention in some ways. So Mary is another one of those. The original plan was for Zach's episode to be released a week or two ago now, but we had some other people that had to be slipped in, so things got pushed back. And normally I do a special episode around Christmas time, as you all know. I usually do something with Gwen. Occasionally I do something with other past guests, but overall it's a little more time consuming for me to do episodes like that. And I know that you'll all be thinking about and praying for Gwen, but Gwen has had knee replacement surgery last week, so she was unable to do a special episode. So because of that, I came to the conclusion that I should probably just have a regular episode. And then I realized that Mary was the perfect person to have on this week. We talked about it and decided that Christmas time was the best time to actually tell Zach's story, and you will understand why as you listen. But right now, I just want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Mary, Zach's mom. Thank you so much, Mary, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Marcy. I'm hoping this will be helpful for other bereaved parents.
Oh, I am certain that it will. And I guess I'm so certain that it will because I know what a blessing you have been over these past several sessions that I've gotten to know you in group. And I know that you've been extremely helpful because I've had other people even comment to me on what a blessing it is to have you in the group, Mary. So you will bless so many people here. I was very excited when you said, hey, Marcy, I think it's time. I think I want to share Zach's story. I'm like, oh, wonderful. So, because as you know, and many listeners do not know, but, you know, as I facilitate support groups now, I never, ever ask people to share their story on the podcast, right? We keep these things totally separately. So a lot of the people in group have shared their story on the podcast before because sometimes that's how they ended up being in the group later. Like they shared first and then they were in the group. But several now have come the other way, that they were in the group and then after being able to share in the group over several months or several sessions, then they decide, you know, I think I want to share more than just with a small group. I want to share this more broadly. So, and that's you.
Yes. Well, and I know how helpful listening to podcasts have been for me. Mm-hmm. And so, and I always like to listen to a brand new one that I've never heard before.
Right.
So I figured the more podcasts that are out there, the more opportunities these parents will have to be able to heal.
Right. And again, you just feel less alone, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's funny. Just today, I'm in a group chat with a bunch of bereaved moms, and there were two different people that wrote in that had just had recent deaths in their community. And of course, that just breaks your mama's heart when you know that some other family is going through their worst nightmare, just as you had. But it just really goes to show how this group just really does get bigger every day, right? Every day,
It
other
does.
kids die, and there are more people that are in need. And then, sometimes you are in this and you listen for a season and then you don't. So I don't expect people to go on and everyone to listen for 5, 10, 15 years. It may be that you need this for a year or two and then you don't. And that's totally fine.
I have needed it for almost 4 years now.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful. And that's
Vain.
beautiful. But it may be that you won't need it for 14. I don't know. We
Maybe.
don't know. Only time will be able to tell.
Right.
But I want you to start out by just talking about Zach, because I actually am excited to hear more about Zach as a kid and Zach growing up, because that's a part of Zach that I don't know very much about.
So Zach was born on January 27th in 1994, and he has an older sister who's 2 years older than him. When he was growing up, he and his sister were very close. They loved hanging out together. They tended to stay in the same group of friends throughout their high school years, which was really nice. They looked a lot alike. When they were little, they used to get into each other's beds just to, I think just to play a trick on me. And then when I'd go to check on them before I went to bed, I couldn't tell who was who because like they had the same eyebrows, the same color hair. And she has brown eyes and he had blue, but with their eyes closed, I couldn't tell who was who.
Right, and they just have the blankets, I'm sure, all tucked up.
Right.
So you couldn't tell length of hair. You couldn't tell any of that.
Right.
Oh, I love that they did that. That's so fun.
I had a home daycare while they were growing up, and he was always so helpful with the children that I had. He loved to play like Matchbox cars and trucks with the boys, well, and the girls. And he loved to read them stories. And whenever we would have a timeout for one of the children, just if they were, being naughty repeatedly, he would always be so sad because they would be sad. And he would try to talk me out of keeping them in their timeout until the time was up. He'd always say, "Oh, Mom, they shouldn't have a minute. They should only have like 5 seconds." And it was just so sweet because he didn't like to see anyone sad.
Aww.
And that even continued into his adult years. When he was in middle school, his dad and I got divorced, and I was having a really rough time. We were all having a really rough time.
Sure.
But he would write little notes on Post-its. "My mom is the best," or "I love my mom." And he would post these notes up on my mirror.
Aww.
And it was just so sweet and thoughtful for him to, care so much about how I felt so that when I would wake up in the morning or, whenever I'd be in my bathroom, I'd see those little reminders of his love for me.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that sweet?
So sweet.
And when he was an adult, he allowed 3 different friends to come in and move into his apartment with him because they didn't have the funds to pay like first and last month's rent into an apartment. So he let them come in to his apartment until they could save up enough money to get out on their own. And I just thought that was very loving.
Yeah, that sounds like a really, really caring kid.
He was very sweet. He was artistic. He loved to draw race cars and NASCAR cars when he was a little kid, and he did such a good job at it. And one afternoon I got a call from his first grade teacher. She said the kids had drawn cars and they were going to put them out in the hallway on the bulletin board. But when Zach drew the picture of his car, he wrote Budweiser on the side of his car because he was a Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan, and he drove the Budweiser car. So he wrote Budweiser. So the teacher asked him, to draw a new picture, but she just called me and said, I just had to laugh. And he spelled it correctly.
Oh, that's hilarious. They couldn't put a beer advertising on the side of the car in the school. That's hilarious.
Right. One Valentine's Day, he took a Valentine's Day card that I had given to him a previous year. Apparently, he hadn't gotten me one, which didn't matter. But he crossed off his name at the top and wrote my name. And then on the bottom, crossed off my name and wrote his. Mm-hmm. And he just acted like, "Oh, here, Mom, here's your card." And then I opened it and realized he had regifted it.
But this is the thing. He probably didn't want to ask somebody. He certainly couldn't ask you to take him to the store to go get a card, right? So he thought, what can I do? What can I do? I want it to be an amazing card. This looks great. She'll never know.
Right. This will do. She won't care.
And you didn't.
No, it was hilarious. And I saved it, and I still have it in my top dresser drawer.
Do you really? Oh,
I do.
That's great.
I do.
I love it.
And one of the little Post-it notes that I had where he wrote, "I love you, Mom." I posted it at one time on Facebook, and one of my girlfriends took that and ordered a necklace. And so I've got a necklace that was made with his writing.
Really?
Which is, yeah, it's beautiful, right?
Wow.
Yeah, very special.
Oh, my word.
He used to come up to my daughter and I. He would sneak up behind us, and then he would get really close up to our ear from behind, and then he would make these puppy dog noises. So it would startle us, but it was just something for us to laugh about. He was really fun. He added so much laughter in our house.
He does sound like a really, really fun guy. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was sweet and fun. He was tall, 6'3". He had blue eyes, but one of his eyes had brown on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
And he always referred to that as his poop eye, which was kind of funny.
I like him.
Yeah, he was fun.
Oh, that is awesome. That is great.
So missed.
Yeah. And he grew up into adulthood and moved out of the house, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, he moved down to Rockwall, Texas. His dad didn't live too far from there, and his dad had moved down there while he was in middle school, and he wanted to see, well, he had seen him once or twice during the year, but I think he wanted to go down there and see if he could kind of repair their relationship or get a little bit more close to him.
Right.
Because once his dad moved away, they didn't really have a really strong bond, and I think he wanted to have that with his dad.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're
Yes.
growing up and becoming a man yourself, and you want to get to know your dad and kind of him more as a person, because your relationship changes so much when you go from being a child to being an adult. I think those relationships with your parents when you're both adults are different, and he didn't. I mean, obviously that developed very organically with you, but probably not so much with his dad because he didn't see him as much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when he moved down there, he just got friends very quickly. He was into disc golfing.
Okay.
Which he taught me to do when he was up here too, before he moved down. And that was something that he and I enjoyed doing so much. He loved playing games. He always used to love playing Mastermind with me and Mancala with his sister.
Nice.
And he was a great cat dad. He had 2 cats, 6 and Annie.
Okay.
And those were his babies. He just loved his cat.
Oh, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So how old was he when he moved back down to Texas? Or moved down to Texas, I should say.
23.
23. Okay. All right. So he's out on his own. He gets a job down there, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
yes, he got 2 jobs down there. He was working for a company out of China as he was consulting for them, a business consultant. And then he was also installing stereos and speakers into vehicles.
okay.
So he had 2 different jobs while he was down there.
So he's a busy guy.
Yes.
And then I know COVID hit, right? And that kind of changed things a bit for him. So, and I think that's kind of an important part of the story. So why don't you go on and talk about that?
Yes. So during COVID, the job that he had installing the base boxes into these cars, that job was eliminated. And then his business consulting job also got drastically reduced. And so he was just kind of living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a lot of extra spending money.
Right.
So on Christmas Day in 2020, my husband just came in from making snow angels with our 4-year-old grandson.
Well, you know what? Let's back up just a little bit because
Okay.
Zach was overall a pretty healthy guy, but he did have a diagnosis of asthma.
Yes.
Right? So, and
Right.
did he have that from childhood then?
He did. When he was 5 or 6,
Uh-huh.
that's when he first had his original problem with asthma.
Uh-huh.
And so he was on albuterol throughout his childhood. Usually, though, he only needed an inhaler or a nebulizer when he had a cold.
Yep.
Because, with the congestion and the wheezing.
Mm-hmm. Very, very common for kids. We call that mild intermittent asthma, that you don't have the asthma all the time, so you don't need inhalers anytime. But if you get sick, that asthma tends to flare up and you tend to need inhalers or nebulizers or different types of treatment during illness. But then between illnesses, you'd end up doing pretty well. And sometimes that continues on, and sometimes people outgrow their asthma into adulthood. Sometimes it gets more severe, or sometimes it just stays kind of intermittent like that. Like for me, I have asthma, and I can, for the most part, I handle it okay. But if I happen to get a cold during my bad allergy season, I will flare up terribly and have trouble. So I don't know what Zach's triggers were, if they continue to be illness or if they're allergy triggers, or what happened that would kind of instigate his asthma, but he was still having asthma as an adult.
Right. And I know one of the times when I went down to visit him, he had gotten some bleach and cleaned his bathroom.
Uh-huh.
And then he had a major problem the following day.
Right. Because breathing that irritant can trigger your asthma. You just have really sensitive airways that can start that coughing and that wheezing with just the slightest little thing sometimes. Mm-hmm.
And also sometimes when he would go and like if it was really wet outside, I think maybe from the fungus or the mildew out in the wood.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must be mold if if the dampness did that to him.
Yes.
Probably some mold allergy that would trigger. Uh-huh.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So then the end of October, it was the day before Halloween, he had to go into a walk-in clinic because he was struggling with his breathing. They gave him oxygen. He needed the oxygen before they gave him a nebulizer treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I kept checking in with him after that. And gradually he got better and better. After that initial day with the oxygen that he needed, he said it was so much better than later on in that day. Oh, and also he said they tested him for COVID and he didn't have COVID. But with Zach, I think he wouldn't have wanted me to worry. And even if he would have tested positive, I think he would have told me that it was negative, just because I was in Indiana, he was in Texas, and he probably thought, I don't want my mom to go crazy with worry.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm just guessing that because on Christmas Day, he was found in his apartment with his nebulizer still running. The medicine had run out, but he was deceased on his couch. He was sitting in an upright position. He would sit up a lot when he was having struggling problems with his breathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to help his airways so he could breathe easier.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was the worst time he's ever had with his asthma.
Sure.
Because it ended his life, because his autopsy did state that the reason of death or the cause of death was asthma complications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, that was a couple months after Halloween. I know a lot of times with COVID, a couple months later, people were still having problems with their lungs. And so he didn't have COVID for his autopsy, but then, that was 2 months after he had that major problem during Halloween.
To be honest, I think he probably didn't have COVID, if that gives you any sort of reassurance. I think it was probably something else, because a COVID PCR test actually stays positive for about 3 months. And so they would have certainly done that on that autopsy. So I think they would have known had he had a COVID infection in the past 3 months.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
If that helps you at all. And this would have only been a month and a half. I mean, a little over a month and a half, almost 2 months. But that would be surprising to me if his PCR would have been totally negative at that point. So I don't know if that offers you a little bit of comfort or
It
that I.
does,
Oh, good.
Marcy.
So I don't think he lied
It
to you. I
does.
really don't think he. I do think they tested him because they were testing everyone at that point, and I do think it was negative. But of course, he had some sort of viral illness. And then you had said too that on the 23rd you knew he wasn't feeling well, or right?
I did not know that.
No, you right, but it was known that he wasn't feeling well.
Right.
Because that's when he went to pick up more medicine.
Right. Yeah. A conversation that his father later shared with Brittany and I, because we were trying to figure out when he passed away.
Right.
And so he shared with us the conversation that they had had. I think Zach wouldn't have wanted me to worry about him, like I had said before. So he probably didn't want to tell me or his sister that day when we were texting that what he had said in his text was he was in a drive-through for an inhaler and nebulizer medicine, but he couldn't even walk in because he thought he was going to pass out if he got up and started walking.
Wow.
So that's why we think that it was on the 23rd because, and also after that, after Wednesday afternoon, he didn't have any activity on his phone. So we're guessing that was when he passed away.
Mm-hmm. And it was his dad who had found him, right?
Yes, it was. Yes, his dad found him in the apartment and called to let us know about it. And as you know, that's, the worst.
The worst call.
There's nothing that can, there are no words that can describe what that does to you for forever.
Right.
And during, that first day, I couldn't talk because I couldn't put words together. Mm-hmm. I couldn't really think except for thinking, how am I going to get through this? And how am I going to get Brittany through this?
Right. Well, and you had started to talk about the snow angels, and I interrupted you to go back, but talk about that. Talk about the snow angels and how you kind of found out about that, because I do think that's a key kind of part of your story too.
The missed calls on my husband's phone.
Yes. So go into that a little bit.
So when he came in.
So he was out doing snow angels with the grandkids, right? And you were watching this and thinking, how could life be better?
Right. I was taking pictures through my patio door, thinking, this is so cute. Gramps out with Easton doing these snow angels. They're running around, throwing snow at each other. It was just pure joy watching those.
Just bliss. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then when they came back in, Kevin said, wow, that's the first time I've made snow angels since my kids were little, and his kids were my kids' ages. Mm-hmm. So it had been a lot. He said that was probably the first time in 15 years that I've made snow angels. And then he went over, looked at his phone, which had been silent while he was outside, and said, wow, this is weird. I got 7 calls from your ex-husband while I was outside. And as soon as he said that, I thought, oh my gosh, something, obviously something is wrong with Zach, or there's, it had to do with Zach because Zach was living down there close to him.
Right.
And there was no other reason he would have called my ex-husband.
Right. Instead of you, right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Right. So he called and didn't want to, blurt it out.
Sure.
So, and I wanted to know, right now, but he was like, is Mary sitting down? And I'm like, what are you calling for? And he said, well, I just want to make sure you're sitting down. And I thought, I just tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And so he said, I just walked into Zach's apartment and he's on the couch and he's gone. And I said, what do you mean he's gone?
Right.
And he said, I was like angry because I didn't want to believe what he was saying. And when he said gone, I thought I knew what he meant, but
I know, but people use those words and really in some ways they shouldn't, right? I know why you avoid it. You don't want to say dead, but
Right. Yeah. And I don't like to say that word. I don't like to say the word dead or died either. I usually say gone or passed away.
I know, so you do it too.
It.
You do it too. But,
yeah. But I mean, I was just like, I just wanted to know right now.
Yeah.
So then he said, yeah, he's gone or passed away. I can't remember even the word that he used that I knew what he was talking about. And I said, well, can you perform CPR? And he goes, no, I can't do that. Well, then later when I found out that on the 23rd was probably when he passed away, then I realized why.
Right. But at the time you don't.
No.
At the time,
no, because I had no idea that he had been sick or that he had needed an inhaler so badly or a nebulizer or an inhaler so badly 2 days before that, I didn't know any of that.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah, as far as I knew, Zach helped me.
And then it's so difficult for you because now you're in Indiana, he's in Texas. I mean, what do you do then?
I made the decision not to go down there because I didn't want to see Zach when he was no longer living.
Yeah.
So I just decided to stay up here.
Yeah.
But I wanted him buried up here.
Sure.
Because I wanted to be able to go and to the cemetery as much as I wanted to.
And honestly, Indiana was his home, right? He went down to Texas for a while. He wanted to get close to his dad. He wanted to know his dad. I get that, but that was not home.
Correct. And he was actually planning on moving back here in the spring anyways. And I mean, yes, he had lived here for 23 years of his life, and this was home. He referred to this as home. That was just I don't think he thought he was going to end up staying there as long as he did once he went down, but he just got to have a group of friends so quickly and get an apartment that he loved, and he loved the independence. And I mean, he has a wonderful group of kids up here though too. I mean, I don't want to say that those friends were more important to him than these friends up here. And these friends that he has up here, they have helped my daughter and I through so much of our grief. They're great kids. We meet over at the cemetery every year for his birthday. They text me or call me and say, hey, can we go visit Zach? And we go over there for an hour or two and sit there and we just talk about Zach. And they're just an amazing group of kids. One just called me last night just to see how I was doing. And they're just amazing. He really had a great group of kids. Good. I mean, friends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you can still call them kids. They're still kids to you, right?
Yeah, they are. But so that was the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
By far. Terrible.
And it's Christmas Day, too.
Yes.
It's Christmas Day. This is, I mean, really, truly, what a nightmare to have this happen to you. Yeah. And this was Christmas morning, kind of?
It was in the early afternoon.
Christmas in the
afternoon. And Christmas has always been my favorite day of the year.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, so many reasons, but yes, it was. The Christmas Day has certainly changed for me now. Yeah. Even though, the Jesus is the reason for the season, but Christmas is a reminder that my life has changed and will never be the same again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of wanted to talk about what happened 3 days after Zach's passing.
Okay.
When I came out into the living room, my husband was reading his devotional. He reads a devotional every morning when he wakes up, and then he reads his Bible. So he was reading his morning devotional. I, came out in the living room, peeked from behind his recliner, and the devotional that he was reading, which was for that specific day, December 28th, 2020, was Psalm 147, verse 3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And it talked about how brokenness is a reality and how it makes you feel powerless to do anything about it, but that God blesses us with his overflowing comfort, and he helps us in our healing from heartache and pain. So when I read that, for the first time in 3 days, I thought, oh my gosh, God. I mean, I just hadn't been thinking clearly. And I realized God is going to help me with this. He's going to get me through this. He's going to give me comfort. He's going to give me peace. And I just felt his peace.
Wow.
I felt his presence. And so when I told Kevin that I couldn't believe that was his devotional for that day, he suggested that maybe I should watch my Barn Girls. Well, I was watching, since COVID started, Barn 45, which is an online Bible study, which is on Facebook Live and YouTube, and it's still on there 5 days a week, 9 till 10 in the morning. Amazing, amazing Bible study. And it's not your ordinary Bible study. It's just, I don't want to say it's better than an ordinary one, but it's just amazing.
Okay.
And so when I watched that one for that morning, they went over Psalm 23.
Wow.
And when they talked about the Lord as my shepherd, they talked about a shepherd is a guardian and protector, all that the sheep need. They give the sheep rest and they lead the sheep. Just like God is our guardian and protector, all that we need, he gives us rest and he leads us. Then they went on to talk about verse 4, thy rod and thy staff comfort me. And these amazing women went on to talk about how you may have never been in this level of alone before, but Jesus is our shepherd and will guide us no matter what horrible circumstances that you're going through right now. And that Jesus, our shepherd, can use his staff to help us out of that deep, dark pit and rescue us.
Mm-hmm.
Marcy, I thought they were speaking directly to me.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
I had goosebumps. I have goosebumps right now while I'm talking about this. I just had an overwhelming sense of comfort, peace, strength. All of a sudden, I had an appetite again.
Really?
Yes. And it was God through them, in me, helping me realize how I am going to get through this with God.
Well, and that's amazing that you had that just 3 days after.
Yes. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. But feelings are fleeting.
Yes, of course. Of course.
And that I don't want to say fleeting, but they're temporary.
Sure.
Temporary.
Right.
Temporary.
I mean, at that moment, you get on a little mountaintop and you think, okay, I'm going to be okay. But it doesn't last. It doesn't last.
I didn't really think I was going to be okay forever, but I just thought right now I feel good. I can eat. I can shower. I can change my clothes. I can, maybe I can get rid of this headache from, crying for 3 days. But then later that afternoon, a package arrived. And it was a package from Zach. Yes, it was our grandson Easton's Christmas presents and Christmas cards and gift cards for Kevin and I. Oh. Yeah, so that did me in again.
So that came 3 days after he died. Oh, my word.
Yes. Yes. Marcy, it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's horrible, but then, I mean, for Zach, it was such a gift that he was still able to do that, right? That he did get it. It's funny because he obviously sent it too late. He obviously weren't getting it on time.
Right. Which was like Zach.
I mean, so great that he did. And especially because he wasn't feeling good and all that, he still went through the bother of doing that and making sure you guys were going to have a good Christmas. I mean, again, it just shows how much he cared about you.
Yeah, he was so sweet.
I want to go back to the Psalm 23 a bit too, because this is a psalm that we all kind of hear growing up. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth me beside the still waters. And that's the part that I wanted to chat about a bit, because I always thought he leadeth me beside still waters, like still waters. Oh, it's nice, beautiful. It's like a good thing, right? And then even
Right.
though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall feel no evil. But when I had somebody talk to me more about that, the still waters are actually dangerous. So when you are a shepherd, if you have your sheep to go drink from the water, you want them drinking from a running stream. So the water should be moving, because when the water is moving, it is a much higher chance that it is healthy water, that it's not infected with anything that will get the sheep sick or the livestock sick.
No.
So you never want them to drink out of the still water. So the still water is actually a dangerous situation. So when it says he leadeth me beside the still waters, that meant that the shepherd is keeping the sheep from drinking that water and moving them on. So it's a protection. But had you ever known that? I had never known that.
No, I've never heard of that.
So I had always kind of wondered, because it seems like it switches from you're in this lovely place by still waters and then goes immediately through the valley of the shadow of death. But actually, those still waters could be deadly. So anyway, it was a beautiful thing when I learned that, because it changed my thinking about that psalm so much. And it was, those still waters may look good and look inviting, but they're actually quite dangerous. So we
Wow.
need someone to help us and protect us from those waters as well. Anyway, it changes a lot
Thank you,
of what that
Marcy.
verse, that whole psalm means, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And, I grew up in northern Michigan, and I know that around a lot of water, and I did know that the running waters down the streams, that's better water than any water that's still. But the correlation though with that psalm, I've never thought
No.
about or realized or heard about.
Never thought about it that way. And obviously I knew that too, right? As a doctor, you know that. Not that it's, we usually like people to just, if they're out in the woods or whatever, you want to be drinking bottled water that we know is safe. But if you have to drink water out in the wilderness, you would always want to make sure that it's something that's flowing, not
Right.
that's in a kind of that's just still and sitting. So anyway, I just knew that you would appreciate that, hearing that verse and how those verses affected you so much. I thought, oh, that's going to add a whole different layer to it as well.
Yes, it sure will. Thank you, Mercy.
So all of you can kind of glean that little bit of information today too. So even though, so that day, obviously a huge day, interestingly enough, that's also the anniversary of my mom's death, the 28th of December. So that's a kind of a big day for me as well.
Well,
You got those gifts, and I'm glad that you had that gift of feeling better though before that came too.
yes, I am too, because that way, well, and I think I know it would have happened eventually.
Yeah.
But just so early, it was so helpful, because that's when those days are the worst.
Yeah.
I at least was able to eat, which, I could eat a little bit, but whenever I'd eat prior to then, I felt like I was going to get sick. I just had zero appetite. So at least, I was able to eat and realize and share with Brittany what happened, that, hey, try this, we need to ask God to help us through this right here in the beginning, because I know we would have gotten it to that point eventually, because she and I are very spiritual. But it was wonderful to have that happen to us 3 days after.
Well, yes, and such a gift to give you a little boost before those gifts came. Because had you been at your low point and then the gifts came, wow, that would have been really devastating.
Right. Yes, that would have put me over the edge even more than what it did, for sure.
I think so too.
Yes.
So talk about those next weeks and what you kind of did and your healing journey.
Worship music were a big thing for me. Worship music made me feel closer to God, which I knew was going to help me through this. And also it it gave me comfort, and the lamenting songs helped me, brought me tears, which was helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just blare that music, Mercy,
Yeah.
and just like until the house was practically shaking, because my emotions were so huge, and it just helped so much. It was so helpful for me. The louder the music, the better. My grandson, he was living here with us, with my daughter.
Oh, they were living with you at the time?
At the time. Yeah, she had come out of an abusive marriage, moved in with us, went to school to get a teaching license. She's now a kindergarten teacher. But, he was 4, and he helped us through, just because, we had to take he was a good distraction from our grief.
Yes. And you need that. You need that sometimes.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And when we went to write, Brittany and I went to write his obituary, and when we were talking about it, he said, "Obituary, Mimi, that's a bad word." And I said, "Oh, no, honey, that's not a bad word." And he said, "It's not? Obituary." And that, that just made us laugh.
Right.
And, humor is always good in those early days.
Well, especially with Zach, since you were mourning
Yes.
Zach, and he was such a
Right.
funny guy.
Oh, yes. Yes, for sure. My thank yous, that brought me some healing. I had over 150 thank yous to write. And so I was so overwhelmed, because I didn't really start writing them too soon. And I kind of put that off,
Yeah.
because I thought it was going to be too painful. But then once I started writing them, and I'd only write a few a day, it was so healing for me. Just, writing those, feeling the love that someone provided to me because of Zach was really healing. Just, filling my heart with love.
Uh-huh.
That was very helpful. Podcasts, I tried to listen to as many podcasts as I could. I was listening to them. I still listen to them when I fall asleep at night, just because it makes me feel less alone. And just hearing helpful hints from other parents helps me to know what things that I can try to help me the rest of my days. And it just makes me feel like I'm not the only one who has this pain.
Yes, I know.
Marcy, I was listening to one last February, and it was Hope After Child Loss, The Empty Chair Endeavor,
Okay.
with Greg Buffkin, and you and Eric were on it.
Yes, we were. We were on that
And
one.
it was amazing. And you had said during that podcast that you started the support group with bereaved parents early in your journey,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and that you are now at Starlight, and you are now leading that virtually.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I heard that, I made a note of it. And then after I finished that podcast, I emailed them, and thank God for you.
Oh.
And I'm so thankful that I heard that podcast, because now I'm a part of your group, and that has just been so, so helpful for me.
Oh, I'm so glad. I mean, it is really, I think their curriculum is amazing. I think the group support can be just unbelievable. I just remember back those first days and weeks after Andy died, us being able to go there and physically be in that space with other bereaved parents was so incredibly helpful. I mean, I just really felt so much less alone. And then as I was doing all of these interviews with people, I was realizing just how few resources were out there. It really hit me. I had one, and she lived in rural Idaho, and there just was nothing for her. There was just nothing. And that's when I started thinking, we need to get this out to people, right? Not everyone has a Starlight. And it's interestingly, because here in Grand Rapids, we actually have 2 pretty great ministries. We have Starlight Ministries, which is faith-based, of course, and then Ellie's Place, which Ellie's Place is also for bereaved parents, bereaved children. They do lots of different support things. They are not faith-based. So there were 2 different ways to go. And we were signed up for Ellie's Place, and they do great work too. There's no question they do great work. Ultimately I decided I needed the faith piece, because I just needed that. I needed that hope for the future. I needed there to be discussions about heaven. I needed talk about seeing him again. I needed all of that part of it. And I knew that Ellie's Place, although when they talked to me, they said, well, we don't talk about that. That's not in what we do, but it tends to come up because a lot of the people that are in the groups are from faith backgrounds. And so their faith does come in. So they don't discourage it. They just don't, it's just not based on it.
Right.
And for me, I really needed that to be faith-based. I needed that to be the underlying foundation, right?
Marcy, I feel the same. I was going through hospice here. They had a support group for bereaved parents, but it was not faith-based. And we could bring up our faith if we decided to do so. But when I heard about Starlight, it was actually, well, the hospice was one night a month.
Yeah.
But it was back when I was in the evening group at Starlight with you, and it fell on the same night. So I decided to stop doing the hospice support group and just start with the Starlight because of the faith-based. And I need that hope too. And we need to look, we're looking forward to eternity. And the hope is what has pointed me so much in my healing.
Yeah. I think so too. I just needed that. Obviously, I needed that piece. And I think it's really important for me. But I know it's not something everybody wants, so that's fine too. And everyone kind of does what they need to do with their own faith and healing journey. So again, so you started that with us this last February. And do you feel like it's kind of changed your faith journey then?
Oh, for sure. I love how they do the light
for the night.
Yes. And not only my faith, but I'm trying to think of how to put this in words. The bond that we all share, the similarities in our faith, it's such a strong connection between all of us. And it makes me feel like we're all like part of a church. Like we're, like, I don't know, like we're the congregation of a church, because I always know that Jesus is present from what everybody discusses. Well, not everything, but with a lot of our discussions. Yeah. And, the prayers and the scripture. And I have definitely gotten to know God more and realize how much he is going to help us through our journey.
But I also think that we are really open and honest in that group. And if you are having a struggle with your faith, or I'm really mad at God today moment, you can say that.
Yes.
And there is no judgment for that. Like, I am really just ticked off at God today. I just cannot handle this. Or I've been ticked off at God for a long time. That's okay. I felt like I was angry with God for quite some time. And I kept thinking to myself, and I told my pastor knew that. And my pastor said, that's okay. I mean, you can be angry with God. God can take that 100%. God can take that. And I remember thinking, as long as I'm angry with God, that means I'm still in relationship with God and I haven't given up my faith. So we're just going to be angry a little bit, and that's all right. But I don't feel like I could go to any Bible study or any church group and show up and say, I'm really mad at God, and not have somebody in the group be like, ooh, wow, she's going to hell. I mean, but I can go to this group, or you can go to this group and really be truly having some faith struggles, and no one's going to judge you for that.
No. Yes, it's so, everyone in the group is so non-judgmental.
And honest.
Trusting God too. With trusting God.
Yes.
It's, I think, difficult for all of us, especially in the beginning, to trust him.
Yes.
Because we, Zach, of my children, I have 3 kids, bonus kids from my husband, and then Brittany and Zach. He was the kid I that needed most of my prayers throughout, his life, because he would make some decisions that weren't the best.
Yeah, right.
And, it was like, oh my gosh, Zach, are you kidding me? I mean, I think that's the reason why my hair is white, because of that. God love him, but he gave me some struggles and required me to get down on my knees and pray to God. Oh God, please get him through this.
Yes.
Make him grow up.
Yeah.
Then when he was, I don't want to say taken away from me, because I know our kids are on loan to us from God, but it was just hard for me to trust God again. And it was, in the beginning, it was hard for me to even believe that prayer was going to do me any good.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard. I mean, I think back to that night when I begged and begged and begged and begged and pleaded and prayed so hard, and obviously my prayers weren't answered, and Andy wasn't saved, and it does affect you, and it affects how you can pray for the future. And you think, didn't do me any good then. Is it really going to do me any good? What does that mean now? And like you said, the trust can go, and all of this stuff can happen. I mean, it affects your faith so dramatically.
It really does. It really does. But I have come to realize that God is good.
Uh-huh.
But in the very beginning, I couldn't say God is good, even though I loved God and honored him and knew, he was our creator. And I, prayed to him and worshiped him. But still, I thought, well,
yeah, really?
I don't know if I can say God is good right now, like early,
I don't know. I think this kind of stinks a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But that's why I think these groups can be so helpful, because we're usually not all down there in the same day. Right? So you go to this group and you have people that are feeling more optimistic and trusting God more and feeling better about their faith. And then it gives you a little hope too. And you admitting your doubts, again, to so many safe people is so incredibly helpful. I just think about that when you unburden yourself and say, wow, I'm really having trouble trusting.
Yes.
Anymore. And then someone else says, yeah, that's a struggle for me too. Or that was a struggle for me, but it's getting better. Or whatever they say, instead of oh my gosh, really? I mean, it's just a different response.
Yes. And when someone says something in the group, and I've thought it before, but I didn't, it's something that I wouldn't admit to my friends or family.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think I'd be ashamed, just because they might think, well, you shouldn't be thinking that.
Yeah.
But then someone else mentions it. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not such a bad person to think that. This is a normal thought for a parent who's lost a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just so reassuring when you have people that have the same struggles that you're having.
For sure.
So
yes.
I am glad that the group has been able to do that for you. And
absolutely, Marcy.
The groups are getting bigger. You're in the morning group now, which I love our morning group. Our morning group has stayed a really nice size. The evening group has gotten really, really big, which we love, but I think that we're going to have to be splitting into two if we keep growing like this, which is amazing. I mean, it's amazing.
That is amazing.
It's amazing, and I hope we have more and more facilitators, and we can do that, because to be able to spread this, like I said, I love the curriculum. I think the curriculum is amazing and awesome, but I also think that it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It goes through like, this is messy and really hard, and we can still get through the messiness and the hardness. And I think a lot of times support groups that are faith-based scare people off a little bit, because they feel like they're just going to have the Bible just preached at them and you're just supposed to be all okay. And and honestly, there are a lot of Christians that some of that, the least helpful advice I got was from Christians. because
Yeah.
and I've heard other people say this too, that they're like, well, aren't you happy that Andy's in heaven? Well, yeah, but I really wanted him here. And that really doesn't make it any easier for me. And now I
No.
just feel guilty because you think I should be happy, you know? Like
Right.
and you wouldn't be happy? Like you
No.
can't be honest with me and tell me you'd be happy if all of a sudden all your kids were dead and in heaven. You wouldn't be celebrating
Exactly.
that they're in heaven.
Yes, and I wanted Zach to get to heaven someday, but not when he was 26.
No, exactly not.
Or when your Andy was
14.
how old?
14.
Oh,
Yeah. No, you didn't. So that's why some of that can be, I think, scary for people because they think it will be different than what it's like. Because
Right.
this is not a space where they're going to tell you that you should be happy.
No.
No.
I think so many people feel uncomfortable with our sadness and they want to change our sadness to joy, or they want us to go back to the same person that we were prior to our child's death. And they might not want to see us cry.
Yeah.
So they just do whatever they can or say whatever they can. And I know some, I know that they're trying to be helpful.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
But-
I'm not saying that they're not. I just had
Right.
David Kessler on a little bit ago. Nobody gets up and says, like, I'm going to be mean to a grieving person today. No, I'm going to say something really unhelpful. No, their hearts are always in the right place. But what comes out of their mouth is sometimes really, really wrong.
Right. Right. Yes, for sure. Marcy, I also wanted to mention how helpful your live streams with you and Gwen have been.
Oh, good.
So helpful. And I love how you pose questions to the Facebook page just so everyone has an opportunity to answer
Yes.
things prior to your live streams.
Yeah. Well, and to think about it a little bit.
Yes.
It's interesting. The one that we just had, now it will be, when this airs, it will be several weeks ago, but we just had one on Veterans Day. And I remember Gwen talking about, that was going to be about sacrifice. And so I kind of thought we were going to have this whole conversation on sacrifice, which we did talk some about sacrifice, but it ended up kind of morphing into honoring, like how we honor, how you honor veterans, but how you honor yourself and awards that you could get and earn and as a bereaved person. And I thought so sometimes even what we think we're going to talk about ends up kind of changing into being something else and being what it needs to be. And that it can be based on what we get as immediate feedback from people or what is written in over those several days ahead of time. So I'm glad that you brought that up. We're taking a little bit of a break. I think this week we should have had one, but Gwen's having some surgery, so I put things off a little bit. So in about 3 weeks, we'll be having a live stream again with Gwen. So again, like Mary mentioned, follow on Instagram and Facebook. And if you do follow Always Andy's Mom Facebook page, a week or so before, several days before, you'll notice all these questions come through to prepare us for the live stream so people can think about it, put some answers in. And I think it makes it a richer discussion.
I agree. And I missed it on Monday because I had a webinar for navigating the holidays. But I saw that you put that session that you had with Gwen on a podcast.
Oh, yes. We always do it on the podcast. So if you miss the live stream, it's fine because it will be aired on Thursday as a podcast every time. I edit it a little bit, especially when Gwen and I are talking about like, what are you looking at there? Are you seeing something? And when Gwen accidentally turns on and off comments, I edit some of that out so it sounds a little bit cleaner, but you don't have to be in the live stream. If you miss the live stream, it's completely fine. You can listen to it the next 3 days later and get caught up then and listen to the discussion then. So anyway, thank you so much, Mary, for sharing Zach with us today. And I just loved being able to hear more about him as a kid and as an adult and just how fun he was. Love it.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And for all that you do.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.